B.J. Armstrong, three-time champ and all-star, NBA agent, now joining us. All right, you watched let's start with the Eastern Conference, B.J.
Okay, Colin, let's start with the Eastern Conference here.
What didn't you like?
Well, where do you want to start here? I mean, where do you want to start? I gotta let you start. You were all over. You had the Clippers. I was stuck on the Clippers getting to the final. So you got to take me through where you want to start here.
Okay, let's start with this. With this. So in the East, I don't buy the Heat, and here's my argument. They've got a great bench. Benches they shrink in the playoffs. It becomes about 2 or 3 closers. Miami's got great athletes. Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. Who's their closer? Whereas, like, the Sixers have multiple closers. So let's start with this premise that teams like Boston, teams like Miami, good bench, play hard, good defense. Between the two teams, I got one guy I trust closing. I don't buy those teams in the East despite great regular seasons. Do you buy that premise?
Well, what I like about the Miami team is their depth, and they have a collection of players that on any given night, any of those players can become a closer depending on the matchup. So whether it's Bam, it's Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero, Kyle Lowry, I like the fact that they have experience. They're battle-tested, many of these players, Kyle Lowry and these guys, PJ Tucker, these guys are all NBA champions, and they are ready, and they will not, they can easily be down in a series by 1 game or 2 games and figure out how to play because they have playoff experience. So even though they don't have that one player that, a Kevin Durant player or a Giannis that you say you can just put the backpack and he'll carry us to the promised land, on any given night, Kyle Lowry is very capable of making big plays. Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and they will have an advantage at some matchup during the course of the game. So I like this team defensively. I love what they do because they are a tough group. They have depth. They can play slow. They can play fast. They can play physical. So I like their chances. And most importantly, I like their toughness and what they do. And they're well coached. So I think this is going to be a team that's going to be a tough out. However, as you look in the playoffs, you still have to get past Giannis. KD will have something to say about that. Maybe the Celtics. So I think there's a lot of parity in the Eastern Conference, but I like this Miami team.
Okay, so you like them. Now, let's take a team that I like more than everybody else. I know Brooklyn is easy to root against, and they don't have a bench, and they don't have the size, and they haven't played together a lot. I have the 2 best closers, arguably in the East. Ben Simmons, if he plays 7-8 minutes a half, doesn't even have to shoot. His length, his defense, his distribution, I think they can get to the Eastern Conference Finals. The chemistry, the amount of games together, the defense. What do you like Brooklyn as much as I do?
Well, as a fan, they've piqued my interest because of the following. In most of the series, they will have, without question, the best player in the series, and that's Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is just an elite offensive player, and you can't stop him. You just can only hope to contain him at any given moment. He can just score. He can take on the double teams. He's playing the game at an exceptional rate and playing the game like never before. So I think in most series he will have the advantage, and because he will have the advantage, it will give them an opportunity to win throughout the playoffs.
Let's go to the West. The Clippers are my dark horse. A lot of wing defenders. I love their coach, Ty Lue. Paul George will be the first or second best player on the floor in many games. He's been in playoff games. I think Kawhi could play. I like their versatility. I think they can throw a lot of lineups. They can go big. They can go small. It's a tough team. Ty Lue's a tough coach. They're playing with house money potentially. So that's my dark horse, the Clippers. Do you like them or not?
I do not like the Clippers as a dark horse, and here's why. Paul George hasn't played, for a length of time in the season, and I think that's going to kind of throw their rhythm off as they get to the playoffs because a lot of these guys, in particular like Reggie Jackson, these guys, they've been the go-to guys throughout the throughout the regular season. And then once the playoffs begin, they'll have to go back into what they probably initially were brought there for, is to be a role player. Now, Paul George is going to come back. He's probably going to play and be that go-to guy. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to play this way, play through Paul George in the playoffs, because they just haven't had enough time to play and really develop that level of chemistry. I understand what you're saying. To think that they can get to the conference finals minus Kawhi Leonard, to me, is like, wow, how good is this team? But now that you said that, I know who you're picking to win the NBA championship next year. So I'm putting the pressure on you right now.
All right. So you didn't. I don't buy into. Here's the team I just don't think I buy into. Golden State. So
Yes.
Klay Thompson's not right. I also think Jordan Poole's an emerging star, and Klay sort of gets in his way. You don't know. They're not very big. Sometimes they just don't have the manpower. And if you look at the NBA right now, between Giannis and Embiid and Durant and DeAndre Ayton, there's a lot of bigs. They're small. They can't try. They don't know what they get with Wiseman. Jonathan Kuminga's a great defender, but he's a kid. I don't really buy the war, and I love everything about the Warriors. I don't buy into them. Do you?
You know what? I buy into this when you talk about the Warriors. What they did over a 5-year period speaks for themselves. They were 3-time champions. They have great players. In particular, you're talking about Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and Steph Curry. Now, however, this is a different group with a different team. So this is what I think is going to make the playoffs interesting, in particular with this series. There are a couple of players in the NBA that you can't play small ball against. One of those players being Jokic, the other out there in the Eastern Conference in Joel Embiid. So when they do go small, or what they consider their death lineup with Draymond Green at the center position, in the playoffs, you play to your matchups. That will be a matchup that will, I think, be an advantage for the Denver Nuggets. Now, you talked about Jordan Poole, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Wiggins, and Draymond Green. That's a very small group. They're going to have to double, okay? They're going to have to double Jokic to some ability. His best ability is his ability to pass. So I think this is going to be a problem because of the matchups. You're going to have to keep big players on the floor, and the Warriors don't have a lot of big players right now. So I think this is an advantage for Jokic. It's going to be interesting to see the rotations that Steve Kerr is going to use, because Jonathan Kuminga is a player, to me, that has shown that he deserves minutes.
Yep.
You got Draymond, you got Kevon Looney. So I think it's going to be a very interesting series. It's going to be a battle of the wills. And I think it's going to be determined by how they're going to try to contain Jokic, because he has an advantage over the centers for the Golden State Warriors.
All right, I want to listen. Frank Vogel's out. Lakers, as you know, as an agent in the NFL, you can get out of bad contracts quickly. You can cut people, you can trade people. In the NBA, it's quicksand. You have to. You just can't get out of it. So, and I've said this. My theory on this, I'm going to throw a theory at you because I think it hurts.
Okay.
I think it hurts the NBA. Is that what makes the NFL great? Is that a rebuilding process can last like 2 years. I mean, Belichick took a 1-15 Dolphin over and just hired a new coach, changed the bottom of the roster in the middle. They were 11-5 the next year. The Rams had Jeff Fisher. They hire Sean McVay. A year later, they go from 4 wins to 11 or 12. They didn't even get a new quarterback. In the NBA, it hurts them. When you're bad, the rebuild can be 6 or 7 years. And here's my theory on it. So the NBA's always been paralyzed by competitive balance and tanking. But that was when Ewing and Tim Duncan would enter the league. They could alter the course of league history. They were all-stars day one. The kids entering the league now are 19. Hell, they're not altering the team. Forget the league. And so the NBA should be much more willing to let people trade who they want to trade. The teams that want to tank are tanking. The kids coming in aren't altering the league. Draft picks don't have nearly the power they had in the Ewing days, the Tim Duncan days, the Jordan days. They just don't, the Akeem Olajuwon days. So the Lakers are in quicksand. So first of all, as an agent, let's start with that theory. The league needs to be more hopeful and optimistic for fans. Lighten up the trade restrictions. Your thoughts?
Well, when you had the collective bargaining agreement, and first of all, Colin, I think you've made some very valid points. And one I definitely want to touch on for just a second is the impact of these young players that are coming in. At one point, you had impactful players that impacted the bottom line, which is winning and losing in this league, whether it was an Akeem Olajuwon or Patrick Ewing and those caliber players, Tim Duncan, for instance. And now you're seeing player development really come to the forefront of this league. So you're absolutely right. I think what you're saying is there is a talent here that's really kind of taking a backseat in the NBA, and that's called roster construction. And what you're seeing here, Colin, is that if you're going to build a team, if you're going to build a team that has any sustainability in the NBA, you're going to have to draft well. And that means you're going to have to draft at a very high caliber, sort of like what the Warriors were able to do when they drafted Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and those level of players. So drafting right now is a premium, but it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get there as quickly as you once could because you're not drafting those level of impact players at the top of the draft. You may get a Jokic, for instance, in the second round. You may get a Giannis outside of the lottery. So what has become in this league is you have to draft and identify these star players. But because of their age, Colin, you just don't know. These one and dones make it very, very difficult. It was already difficult to scout and evaluate players, but it's very difficult to do now to evaluate, scout these players and say which one of these guys are going to become a star. When you see a Kevin Durant, for instance, you say, I feel pretty good about that. What you're hoping is you're not drafting a player at that level and then that player just becomes a role player. And that's what you're seeing more and more in the NBA. It's very hard to identify the star players, especially at the top, because you may get that same caliber of player in the second round.
So one more question. Lakers are a mess. My theory is I'd keep LeBron. I would put everything else on the table, including moving Anthony Davis. If somebody gave you an offer, if you ran that team, is there a quick solution on the Westbrook, AD, old roster, old bench? Any quick solution here in a minute?
I don't think there's a quick solution. I think, the Lakers are going to have to really say the following. What are you going to do with your two players in particular, LeBron James and Anthony Davis? Okay. And that all starts with whether or not LeBron James and the Lakers organization, what are they going to do with his extension or his ability to have an extension? I think you start there and then everything else to me will fall into place, whether they're going to build a team, whether they feel those two guys still have the ability to compete at the highest level and win a championship. Because, Colin, when you look at what they have in order to build the rest of the team, which we talk about roster construction, how are you going to put together a group, right, with this team if you don't have the pieces or the resources or the assets, however you want to call it, to build a team as it's currently constructed? So they got a lot of questions here. LeBron James had a great individual season. But you have to say the following. He only played in 50-something games? And then what is that going to translate moving forward with this organization? So I think they have a lot of questions. They have three excellent players individually. But right now, Colin, they're not playing well as a group. And those are concerns that the Lakers organization are going to have to answer, and they're going to have to answer over the summer. Yeah.
BJ Armstrong, great seeing you again, my man. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, and good luck with your Clippers.
Thanks. So I like the Clippers much more than BJ. He likes the Heat much more than I do, so here we go. I think we both think Brooklyn's interesting, and but there you go. So he likes Miami. I have real questions. They have a collection of guys who have played in big games. That does help Miami. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.